And this is the C1 Universal Heads-Up Display, and this promises to add a high-resolution HUD to our vehicle, which can display information such as the speed of the vehicle, the direction, battery voltage, RPMs, and more. And on this video, I'm going to show you what you get inside of this box when you purchase one of the C1 Heads-Up Display devices. And then I'm going to take it out to the car so we can test it out and see how well it actually works. And as always, I placed a link to this device in the description down below in case you want to get one. But with that being said, let's take a look at the C1 heads-up display system. But let's take a look at the main box, which contains the actual heads-up display. Ooh, that's very nice. And this thing's actually quite compact. Just to give you an idea of scale, here it is sitting on top of my palm. And this is where the magic happens. We have this widescreen LCD display, which is gonna project the image onto the surface right here. Now this thing right here is gonna fold out like this, so you can see how this is gonna reflect off here, and then it's gonna go to our eyes. Now this portion right here has some kind of coating on there. You can kind of see that on there, and that's gonna help to increase the reflectiveness to make that heads-up display visible. And it also has a curvature. You can see how it curves around. And on the side of the heads-up display unit, we have this little switch which is for power, and then we have this little dial that can go up, can go down, or we can press in to select a menu item. Moving to the front of the heads-up display unit, we have a power input in the form of a mini USB connector, and it says OBD2 plus GPS. We can use this heads-up display device by itself because it has built-in GPS, or we can connect it to the OBD2 port of our vehicle to obtain more data to be displayed on this screen for us to be able to see when we're driving. And finally, towards the top of the unit, we have this little light sensor right here that allows the C1 heads-up display to adjust the brightness based on if it's day or night. But now let's take a look at the rest of the accessories. And there's actually two cables included, which are the power cables. There's two ways to power the C1 heads-up display. The very first one is simply to connect it to the cigarette lighter port of our vehicle, and this is the end that goes to the heads-up display unit. The second way of powering it is with the OBD2 port of our vehicle, and this will go to the heads-up display. Now, using the OBD2 port does provide the additional data that can be displayed on the unit itself. And finally, to secure the C1 heads-up display unit to our vehicle, they have provided this grip pad which has double-sided stickiness to each side. So I can peel this, stick this to the back, peel this one more time, and then stick this to my dash. We also get this microfiber cleaning cloth to clean this surface without scratching it or without damaging the special coating that's on it. And finally, we get this black and white user manual, which is fairly thin, but it is in English, and shows us how to operate the unit, how to access the different functions, and the menu items that we can activate on the heads-up display device. But now let's move over to the vehicle so we can see this thing in action. And before I install the C1 heads-up display, the very first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna practice setting this on the correct location. And that is because heads-up displays are very sensitive to not being aligned correctly. So if I place my heads-up display a little bit facing towards the right or a little bit facing towards the left, the driver is not gonna see the heads-up display correctly. So the heads-up display system has to be as straight as possible right in front of where the driver is gonna be sitting at, so it can have the best projection possible. And once I find the spot where I want the display to be and I feel comfortable with the alignment, I'm gonna go ahead and use the sticky pad to secure it in place. But before I apply the sticky pad, I'm gonna clean this surface and I'm gonna clean this surface to make sure that they are not greasy and that the sticky pad is gonna stick as best as possible. I can peel the back of that sticky pad, place it on the heads-up display, peel the back of that sticky pad again, and very carefully, watching the alignment, I'm gonna press down right here gently until the sticky pad secures the heads-up display into its location. And if you're curious to see what the C1 heads-up display looks like from the outside, here it is. And you can also see how I routed that power cable following the trim line of the Corolla, which kind of helps to conceal the cable. And here's the C1 heads-up display. Now the display is going to ask us if we want GPS or OBD2 mode. Right now, because we're not connected to the OBD2 port of the car, this is just working right off the cigarette lighter port. And the very first screen that we have is our miles per hour. However, if we wanted to see another one of the built-in screens, I can click on the little wheel, and that is going to show us the next screen, in this case the miles per hour. And if I press that little button one more time, now we get another gauge screen. Here we have the miles per hour, and then we have a little indicator in the bottom how many GPS satellites we have acquired and the battery voltage. But it has another built-in screen. I'm gonna tap that one more time, and I really like this one because on this side we have our direction, how many satellites we acquire, in this case 10 GPS satellites, our time, and then we have the battery voltage. We also have a little trip counter, and then we have their miles per hour in the center. And if I press that button one more time, we get one more gauge screen. If we don't want to see graphics and we only want to see numbers, here we have our speed, number of GPS satellites, our voltage, our direction, trip time, and more. If I press that button one more time, we get the results of our quarter mile time or the distance that we have traveled, and those are only going to be populated if we initiate the test. Now I can do the same thing with the brake test. I can initiate that and it will tell me, calculate approximately how long it took me in terms of distance to come to a stop. But we can also customize this heads-up display. I'm going to access the menu, and on the menu we have a couple of different options on here. First off, we can change the languages, and we can also set a speeding alarm. So it's going to alert us when we exceed a speed, but we can also set a coolant alarm, and I think the coolant alarm is going to be really helpful if we're trying to keep an eye out on the temperature of our vehicle, especially if we don't want to take our eyes off the road and we want to be notified that we're about to overheat. We can do that. We can also set an RPM alarm if we want to be told when we hit a certain amount of RPMs, and we can do the same thing for the battery, and we can also adjust or compensate for any difference between our speedometer and the GPS display speed that is shown on the heads-up display device. But we can also change the color of the information that is being displayed in the different gauges. As you can see right now, I am cycling to the different colors that are available, and we can do that for the 3 parameters, color 1, color 2, or color 3. Now for brightness, remember this has a built-in brightness adjustment, and I like to leave that in auto. However, you could technically adjust the brightness manually if you wanted to bring that brightness down, but so far I have found that the brightness in auto works perfectly, if not just about right. So I'm going to leave mine on auto. And we can also change their speed unit between miles per hour and kilometers per hour. But if you wanted to activate some of the tests that I showed you, such as the acceleration test, which is the 0 to 60, or the braking test, I will go to the driving test portion of this menu, and then I will select either speed up test to get acceleration results or the brake test to get braking results. And we're now driving around with the C1 heads-up display. Now this is not easy because I am trying to hold the camera right in front of my face so you can get an idea of how it looks like to the driver. The heads-up display is not visible to the passenger, it's only visible to the person right behind the heads-up display. And as you can see, we are pulling the GPS information, or the system is pulling the GPS information from the satellites. Remember, the only thing that we have connected to the car is this unit to the cigarette lighter adapter port. We can also see on the left side that we are heading east. That is pretty neat. Now the battery voltage is also helpful to have, especially if you're having trouble with your car battery, or if at any point your car battery is about to die. I think it is convenient to be able to see the battery voltage. But I also want to show you that some of the gauges can actually be customized. For example, here we have the volts, and here we have the time. If I want to change that information, now I have the direction. Change that one more time. I have the time on the top, time on the bottom, or the GPS satellites. Well, how about the bottom? I can do the same thing for that. I can have the GPS, how much time has elapsed, the distance that the car has moved, the elevation, or we can have the volts as well. And here's the other gauge that we can also customize. We can have the direction be shown in there. We can have the real-time clock. We can have the number of satellites. We can have the time elapsed, or we can have the distance, or we can have the elevation, and we can have the voltage. Same thing with the left side. We can adjust the data that we want to see displayed on there. Now remember, this is only the data that is available with the cigarette lighter adapter plug. Once we hook up the OBD adapter, we should have more options to choose from. But now let's connect the heads-up display with the OBD2 adapter so we can see the additional functions that this provides. And if you're having trouble finding the OBD2 port on your vehicle, I have made a separate video showing how to find it. I'll put a link to that in the description down below. And we're now connected with the OBD2 adapter, and right away we can see that we get now the temperature of our engine coolant. But let me cycle through here so I can show you some of the available data points. Now, not all of them are going to be accessible. This is going to depend greatly on your car, whether it supports a specific data or not. Here we have the engine coolant temperature in the upper left hand part, or we have the RPMs. Let's see those things go up. And I'll cycle through the rest of them so you can see them. And in case they are active in your vehicle, they will produce data. But if they're not active in your vehicle, they are not going to produce any information. Let's see if the air to fuel ratio is available. Yep. Air to fuel ratio is available on here. And same thing for the right hand side of the screen, we can also customize that information. And here's the other gauge where instead of graphics we just have numbers, and here we can see that we have the tachometer, which is our RPMs, voltage, and then if you look at the bottom we have the oil temperature. And this is probably my favorite view with the OBD2 adapter because I have the miles per hour on the left hand side and then I have the RPMs on the right hand side, which you can see on here how they respond to me giving a little bit of gas to the car. That is really cool. And here's the other gauge with the OBD2 adapter. We can again customize the upper portion and we can customize the lower portion. Give it a little of an RPM on there. That is really cool. I like how that little indicator moves up and we can see the numbers right here change. I'm going to show you how I can customize the top. And we can also customize the bottom. Really, really cool. But the other advantage of connecting the OBD2 adapter is that we can now use the heads-up display gauge like an OBD2 scan tool. So as you can see right now, we are checking for engine codes on our vehicle and we see that we do not have any engine codes. If we have some kind of check engine light, we can potentially see what the check engine light is for. And if we wanted to further diagnose the vehicle with the OBD2 adapter, we can go into OBD diagnose, and here's so we can check for any DTC, which are trouble codes on our vehicle that will potentially set off a check engine light, but we can also erase any potential trouble codes which will turn off the check engine light. But before I show you what this thing looks like at night, I do want to show you what I mean about the alignment. Notice that I am leaning towards the left and towards the right. There is some room on there where you're still going to be able to see the heads-up display, but centering the display as best as you can in the center of the console is going to allow you room to move your head around and drive around and still be able to see the display. And here's the C1 heads-up display system at night. And as you can see, the automatic brightness adjustment has kicked in, so the heads-up display image is comfortable to see at night. Not too bright and not too dark. Now this next gauge shows the miles per hour, but unfortunately it has that image of the road in the bottom. I really wish it did not have that image. It will look so clean if it only showed me the miles per hour. Now this one I really like because not only is it nice and colorful and you got that little moving die indicating your speed, it shows only the information that I need. Now you have that little graphic again in the bottom, but it's not as large as the previous gauge where I think it was a little bit distracting on it. Now this one I really like. It reminds me of an airplane. It has cool graphics but also shows me good information. Miles per hour, I have my direction, I have my battery voltage, so I definitely like this view. And that was the C1 heads-up display system, which as you saw, even if it's only used with the cigarette lighter port of the vehicle, it can add quite a bit of useful information for us in our line of sight. So it potentially could make it a little safer to drive because now we don't have to look down at our dashboard to see the speed. We can have that directly in front of us. And if we decide to use the OBD2 adapter connection, then we get the additional gauges and information coming straight from our vehicle. And I think that's going to come in handy for anybody who's trying to keep an eye out on their RPMs or things like the engine coolant temperature of the vehicle. I also like the fact that they included that diagnostic mode, which allows us to pull the engine codes from our vehicle and also erase them, which can potentially turn off a check engine light. And the fact that it is built in onto the system, it means I don't have to carry a separate scan tool if I ever need to check the engine codes on my car. But I do wish that we could customize the heads-up display system a little bit more. However, at the price point that this thing is being offered, it's hard to ask for more. I also don't expect to see any updates for the system come out in the future. The system I think is gonna be just the way it is when we received it. I don't think it's ever gonna improve or get better. But again, at the price point that it is being offered, I think it makes sense. So if you guys have any other questions regarding the C1 heads-up display system, please put that in the comments down below. Remember, I also put a link in the description also in case you wanna get one of these units for yourself. And if you found any part of this video helpful, hit the thumbs up button to support the channel and stay tuned as I have a lot more heads-up display reviews coming up and other cool car gadgets for you guys. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.